Hello and welcome to Console Shock with me, Trev, and Stu. How's it going, Stu?
Yeah, it's going really well, Trev. Really well.
How's the StreamYard order that we talked about? Is it you still waiting for a date on that, or has it come through yet? Or
my StreamYard order?
Oh my god, I got that. I'm looking at StreamYard on the screen.
Oh yes,
Steam Deck. Steam Deck was what I'm talking about. It's got ST at the start, which is appropriate for today's episode.
No. I have pre-ordered it, but it will come when it comes, and
be this time next year, I think, isn't it? We talked about it at length, didn't we, in the last episode?
Exactly, yeah.
Don't think anything's changed, has it, in the week or two since it got released, or the orders got released?
There's been a few more videos about it saying, "Oh, it's terrible," saying it's really good, and then saying it's terrible again. So, it's I'm looking forward to it, but.
Yeah, I think the SD card thing is a bit of a controversy still, isn't it? Although I think everyone's saying that it won't be as bad as we thought it might be with installing your games on it. So I'm still waiting for people to see, try and do some experiments on some of the hardware that's already out there for that. Putting Grand Theft Auto on it and seeing how that copes on some crappy old Amazon cheapo SD card. But yeah, I guess we'll have to wait till next year to get the real figures in. What else you been up to, Stu?
I've just really been still into my Japanese RPGs on my Switch.
You've been serious
with them?
Japanese RPGs,
role-playing games.
Yeah. I thought you were. I thought that was like kryptonite to you.
Well,
RPG.
I don't know. I've sort of got into them. I completed one. Then I played that. It's spelled YS Ease. The latest one of that, and I don't know. I just like sitting down with it and playing it for sort of an hour or so, and I think I'm nearly at the end of it, to be honest. But that's a sort of a good game, and enjoying that. So, and then hopefully I'll finish that soon, and then the flight simulator's out for the Xbox Series X. So I'll hopefully give that a go and.
I played it on. I played the PC version that came out. Was it last year? And it just ran like utter toilet. I mean, my gaming PC's not massively old or anything. It's half decent, even still by today's standards. But it just ran like utter toilet. It was fun what I was able to play, but then it's a nightmare downloading it. It's like literally over 100 gigs, and then you download that, and then when you get into the game, you'll select a map that you haven't downloaded yet, and there's another big chunk that downloads. It's such a pain to get going. I'm kind of waiting for them to stick it on the Game Pass streaming, so I can just go on a browser or something, and apparently there'll be an app on your Xbox, whether it's the original Xbox One or the older Xbox One or the Series consoles, that will let you access the cloud streaming. So I think I'd rather play it like that. I know it's not actually, the native version isn't compatible with the Xbox One, but apparently they'll make it available to stream to the Xbox One. So I think I'd rather play it on that. I haven't got to download anything. It's not a bit of twitchy game where you need instant you need no lag or anything. So that will probably be quite a good game to sort of cloud stream. And so you weren't really able to so you actually played it then? You're able to download everything?
I think it only came out yesterday, but I've downloaded it. But I'll wait till I finish the other game and then get onto that. And fingers crossed. I'm just like, I'm just worried about a huge sort of learning curve? Curve to learn it, or where it's you want to do all the fun bits, but you've just got to press loads of sort of buttons and sort of things like that, and some of it will just be really sort of quite sort of challenging to do. But then once you get into it, it'll be sort of the first sort of couple of hours of doing tutorials and things, which will be a bit boring when I just want to sort of fly all over Dover.
I want to fly away, as Lenny Kravitz said in the 90s.
Exactly.
That's what we want to do, isn't it? Well, it's funny that we talk about flight simulators, because they tended to be things that people associate with, home computers and obviously the PC, where the latest Microsoft Flight Sim came out last year and now coming out on consoles. But when I think about sort of, the flight simulators that I really loved, I would have to go back to like the Commodore Amiga and, of course, the Atari ST and even the Commodore 64 and the Spectrum. And it's kind of in that home computers realm is where we're going to today, because we're going to welcome back a guest. We've had him on before. He's been kind enough to join us again to chat about even more inane home computer 80s and 90s stuff that people like us love to talk about. And it's Marc from the Joysticks channel on YouTube. Thanks for coming back on, Marc.
Oh, you're more than welcome. It's an absolute joy to be here. And I'll just take you to task with that there. Inane? What do you mean inane? I'm going to be dropping some wisdom nuggets today. No inane chatter from me. I don't know what you're talking about.
This is all deadly serious stuff, isn't it, to us? This is not joking at all when we're talking about these things.
You were talking about Flight Simulator. I've actually downloaded that myself.
Yeah, what do you think about it?
Well, I haven't actually played it. That's the thing.
I saw what people are doing. They're just downloading it. They can't play it.
But what was nice about the Xbox Live Game Pass thing, or whatever it's called, is that they're starting to release games. You can download them in advance and then just play them when they're released. So it's sitting on my hard drive on my Xbox Series X waiting to go. But I have watched a couple of videos because, like Stuart, I'm feeling a bit intrepid about the complexity of the game. But apparently you can like switch on lots of guidance modes and, flight assists and things. And you can even set it so that you're already in the air next to all the things. And you can just fly around and have fun if that's what you want. It seems like you can choose how complex you want your simulation to be, which is quite cool.
Because last year I played... one of the train sim games, and I thought, what train sim? That's rubbish. And it was on Game Pass, and I was furloughed, and I think I spent a whole day driving the Great Western trains up and down. And I was
very relaxing, though, aren't they? They're quite relaxing.
What else are you going to do when you're furloughed?
I just sat there and you got this distance to go, you got your speed, you're managing everything, and then I just got really far in it, or not far in it. I did quite a lot. And then I just got stuck at a station, and what the hell do I press to get going? And I just couldn't find the right button. I just clicked everything on the screen, and then I ended up having to reset it, and then just did the same thing. It was good. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, you need to play Densha to Go, which is the Japanese sort of arcade train sim, and that's nowhere near as that. That's a lot of fun. It's nowhere near as complicated. It's just a handful of buttons. And you're just trying to like make sure you like perfectly land in like the platform at the right time and in the right position. There's a great Techmoan video where he imported like a TV, a plug and play TV, and it gives you a nice controls and like proper train controls. But they're on the PS1, PS2, Dreamcast. I think they still do them for like PS3 and 4. So you could probably import them. But there will also be a language barrier. But I think there's people who've sort of translated some of the earlier PS2 ones. But what I would love, talking as someone, I'm probably the only person that's played the new Microsoft Flight Simulator. I was able to download it only because I was, I had the PC version. I would love like, I'm going to have to correct myself as I say this, but I would love like a new Pilot Wings 64. And we got like Pilot Wings Resort on the 3DS, which was all right, but I'd like a proper console one. But I mentioned that on something, and I put it on, I can't remember if it was on Facebook or Twitter or something. And someone said, "Oh yeah, there is one. It's called Ultra Wings." And I was like, "Really? What the hell? Ultra Wings? When did this come out?" Oh, it came out like 2019. So yeah, there's like
Is it made by Nintendo?
No, it's I think it was an indie game. I think it got like kickstarted or something. But it was people that were like, "Yeah, we really like Pilot Wings," but Nintendo don't give a crap about Pilot Wings these days, it seems. So let's make one. And it's on the Switch, it's on the PS4, and there's a VR version. I think it was originally a VR game, and they made a 2D version to bring it on the Switch and the other consoles. It's like £10 or something. So if you want like a really sort of fun, like Pilot Wingsy flight simulator, you could go for Ultra Wings, which is on everything. So yeah,
I'm looking at a video of it now. It looks pretty good actually. But I was just wondering, how moddable is Microsoft Flight Simulator? Somebody needs to get hold of that and just start putting massive orange rings in the sky, and you can start flying your Boeing 747.
That'd be cool. Yeah,
flying a 747 through.
hitting balls through things in a jetpack or something. It was always the fun one. I love that game on the N64. It's one of my top sort of 3 N64 games, Pilot Wings. Play the absolute crap out of it. The good games are so expensive on the N64. You had to have ones that you could just play forever, and that was one of them. Luckily,
were they about 60 quid or something like that, brand new?
Yeah. They were 60 quid, I think.
Allowing for inflation, what's that now?
Oh God, you
Knocking
double it now, I think.
Yeah.
You double it now, I think. It was kind of a revelation when we got to the Saturn and the PlayStation, and everything was sort of became $39.99 and $45, wasn't it? It was a huge discount. Although for us, Amiga people and ST people, we were paying. Well, probably weren't paying for a lot of our games.
To say, hang on a second.
quite frankly,
for games.
They released games in actual shops for the Amiga. I thought you just got your mate to give them to you.
Yeah,
that was one of the joys of the PlayStation, wasn't it? Because of the CD. Reduced the production costs, so the games were a lot cheaper.
Yeah, exactly. And that also kind of leads us on to the main crux of what we're going to be chatting about, and that is the very admirable efforts of developers, and I'm sure we'll discuss sometimes individuals for some of these, to port. We took arcade games for granted on the PlayStation, Saturn, as we just kind of mentioned, and that was where they kind of, blossomed, shall we say. But there was a lot of those famous old arcade games from your Capcoms and your Taitos and Namco and all the greats. There'd be some plucky little British developer that would try and shoehorn some of those
in 6 weeks.
In 6 weeks.
In 6 weeks.
Yeah. Onto the home computers. We're not going to cover all of them. We've got Marc on, and we're big fans of the Atari ST as well, especially Stu. Still in the closet a little bit about liking the Atari ST, I think. He's always like, it's rubbish, Amiga. But we know he loves a bit of that. He loves 16 colors, 8 mega. He loves that extra 0.8 megahertz that it had over the Amiga.
0.8. Absolutely key.
Yeah, is that a 13% or something faster? Those 3D games to absolutely whiz around on the screen compared to the, single figure frame rates on the Amiga.
Hang on, can I jump in here?
Yeah, go for it.
This is where I put on my ST fan hat and start defending the good old ST. But I don't actually. When it comes to these kind of playground wars, even at the time, I took a step back. The ST isn't as good a gaming machine as the Amiga, and that's just the way it is. I don't know. Did we talk about this last time? I don't know if I'm just going over old ground.
We probably did, but we talk about it practically every week anyway, so it's fine.
It's relevant to mention here anyway that the ST just doesn't have the hardware. It came out before the Amiga. It was marketed to be as cheap as possible and get 16-bit home computers into people's houses for as little money as possible. So they did cut a lot of corners, and there's not as much hardware inside that's good for gaming. Like if you think about the Amiga, it's got hardware scrolling, it's got hardware sprites, things like that help it to do those kind of arcade style games. Whereas the ST, it doesn't have any of that. It's a very kind of open architecture. You've got memory, you've got CPU, right, off you go. So basically it took expertise and time to get the ST to scroll as smoothly as the Amiga often did. For that reason, a lot of the arcade ports are not so good. They're not so good, especially if it is an arcade game where there were big sprites and scrolling screens and lots of smooth action. Having said that, there are lots of really, really good ST arcade ports. But they did tend to be the ones where there wasn't so much scrolling or the sprites were smaller. So I'm thinking of things like, Bubble Bobble, Rainbow Islands, New Zealand Story, Pang, Super Sprint. These all pretty much got nigh on arcade perfect ports, really, really good ports. But as soon as the sprites got bigger or the screen needed to move at any kind of pace, that's when the ST started to struggle a little bit. I mean, really gifted coders, and I'm thinking like the likes of it's Thalion, isn't it? The ones who used to code demos and then started coding games. Yeah, they've shown that it can be done. I just think the expertise was a bit few and far between. And you got publishers like US Gold who want your game churned out in a few months. and don't want to spend too much money on it, then they're not going to go and find that expertise or spend the time waiting for a programmer to get to grips with it. So that's when you get, you've mentioned, haven't you, Final Fight is a prime example of that.
I mean, that was literally one chap, wasn't it? I think who did that. I think it was Richard Alpin, I think was his name.
Right.
So that was another US Gold got a lot of those Capcom games, and I kind of what kind of triggered me to want to do this as a subject was I kind of did a big I had a bit of a kick recently of just going through a lot of Atari ST arcade ports, because a lot of them, I perhaps only experienced on the Amiga because that was what I grew up with. And I didn't get a chance to see them, in the flesh on the Atari ST. So with, armed with a Gotek inside my 520 STE with a 4 mega RAM upgrade, I thought, let's sort of look at them. And I was actually impressed by Final Fight because it's got all the characters are in there, and it's the sprites are huge. They look very impressive. I would say I think all the moves are in there as well. Just the big downgrades are really in the sound, or you've got some very janky sort of ST music. Kind of a single tune really plays on repeat over and over again throughout the entire game, which is like infuriating. You have to literally turn the sound off really to be able to enjoy it. The scrolling is quite juddery as well, as you've mentioned, Mark, as well, because obviously the hardware isn't there to sort of help with that. But it's gone.
The thing about Final Fight is it uses the arcade assets. So the sprites look fantastic. They're just, they're the same sprites, so they look great. I mean, using a lot less color, obviously, because of the ST's color palette. But there's a problem with that because the ST's screen resolution is so much smaller. That those sprites are now massive on the screen. And because the sprites are so much bigger, they need to be animated and they need to be moved around. So I'm with you, really. I think the programmer's done a brilliant job to get what's there moving around. Like, there's not many ST games with that many huge sprites all moving around at the same time. So fair play to him there, no doubt about it.
That's a really interesting point as well, actually, about the sprite sizes. Like, it affects it. It's sort of a thing that carried on into subsequent generations. Like, I was playing Mortal Kombat 2 on the Sega Saturn, and the sprites look huge on that, even compared to the arcade. But in reality, what has happened is basically what you've described with Final Fight. They got the arcade assets, kept those at the same size, pixel dimensions, the actual character sprites. But because the overall resolution of the screen resolution is 320 by 240, which is smaller than what the original arcade was, which is a shade bigger, like 400 by 500 or something. I couldn't remember the exact dimensions. Those sprites look even bigger on the screen.
Yeah, and the thing, it's got a special place in my memory. Final Fight has. I bought Final Fight with birthday money, if I remember rightly. I remember going out.
Oh, cool.
I bought Final Fight and Oh Carolina on CD single by Shaggy.
Oh, wow.
So those
You've pinned that down to an exact date, I think, there, haven't you?
Those two things are indelibly linked in my mind. So whenever I play Final Fight, I just hear Shaggy's voice in the background. Oh, Carolina. I can't break that link.
That's great. I mean, it plays pretty well for a scrolling beat 'em up. Is a genre that's quite difficult to do. Even on the Amiga, doesn't really have any standout, scrolling beat 'em ups. Probably like something like Double Dragon 2, which is a decent port, which is also very good on the Atari ST. Actually, might actually be the best scrolling beat 'em up on the Atari ST. Final Fight, I thought I quite enjoyed it. What I played, I mean, it does get a bit tedious. You're kind of you get ganged up on a lot more than you would in the original arcade version on both sides. So, to be honest, you kind of need a turbo fire on like whatever controller you're using, because you're going to be hammering that button, trying to punch the bad guys. But considering it was basically developed by one person, I think it's actually quite impressive. The Amiga version is better. It's got the smooth scrolling, doesn't have any music. To be honest, anybody will say, well, it's not really the versions you want to play these days. And of course it isn't. But if we're looking at ones that were sort of contemporary to when the arcade machine came out, I think you'd probably want to go with the Mega CD version. I think that would be the one to play because it's got really good music, remixed CD audio music. It's got all the characters. Plays better than the SNES version. It's got the SNES version doesn't have Guy in it, which is a cardinal sin for Final Fight, really. And US Gold were also quite guilty of substandard ports of other Capcom games. I mean, Street Fighter 2, that's got to be the most famous market, isn't it? Right there, I think.
Can we leave that one alone? It still hurts. It still hurts.
We're going there.
30 odd years later. Well, when you sent me the message to be on the podcast, you said it was going to be about wonky ST arcade ports that we actually enjoy.
Yeah.
I'm not sure there's anything to enjoy on the ST version of Street Fighter 2.
Was that one that you went out and bought, at the time, thinking,
yes,
here we go?
I did. But the thing is, I upgraded my ST, especially for that game, because it needed 1 meg. I had a 1/2 meg ST. So I upgraded the memory to play that. Can you imagine the disappointment when I eventually got it home? Oh, just terrible. Just where do you start with it? I mean, the frame rate is abysmal. Trying to fit all of that move set onto one fire button just doesn't work.
No.
The sprites look pretty poor in their lower resolution, lower colors. Because obviously I'd played Street Fighter 2 at the arcade and I'd played it on the Super Nintendo, and I was expecting something a little bit similar to that on the ST, and just nowhere near.
I'm not sure there's a way you could get that game on the. I mean, there's been some demos of an STE version, and an STE probably could do kind of a Mega Drive level version of Street Fighter 2 on the ST. Well, the Mega Drive is really, really good. Some people might say it's the best version of the 16 bits, but yeah.
Well, when you port a game to a less powerful system, you have to make compromises, don't you?
Yeah.
So you choose where to make those compromises. Now, from the person playing it's perspective, you want the gameplay. That's the most important element that you want translated. You want it to feel like the same game. But I don't think publishers thought the same way. I think they just wanted the game to look as similar to the arcade as possible. Like going back to Final Fight, that did it brilliantly, because in screenshots, it just looked like Final Fight with slightly muddier colors. People went out and bought it. I was one of them. Because you were thinking you were getting the arcade. And I imagine it's the same for Street Fighter 2. People go out and buy it. It looks just like the arcade. It's not until you get it home and you see what it moves like that it's the problem. So that kind of animation and movement you don't see, because, there was no such thing as YouTube back then. We couldn't watch gameplay videos. No. We could only look at magazine screenshots and go off those. So I think this is my cynical mode anyway. I think publishers were very much saying, no, it needs to look like the arcade, and it doesn't really matter how it moves or plays at this point. Just make it look like the arcade and it will sell.
Well, whereas 100%, agree with you there, Mark. It's all about, the game's got to look good on the back of the box. When you go into sort of Boots or whatever to buy a computer game, and you look on the back of the box and you go, that looks brilliant. And in small print, it says, PC version or something like that. And, I as a kid, I did feel sort of duped, maybe sort of 1 or 2 times, about, it doesn't quite look like the box art, does it? Or they've shown the amazing sort of, title screen. Well, actually, when you get into the game, it doesn't look quite the same. And it says you on the back of the box, they can describe the gameplay, but they're not going to say this is a jerky mess, is it? They're going to describe it as, I experienced the amazing arcade action here in the in your own home or whatever. And so I think what you're saying is that, I mean, when you're talking about Street Fighter 2 or Final Fight, you see the boards that these arcade games play on, and they're, the size of probably, an A3 sheet of paper with 1,000,001 chips on them, and, whatever sort of bit of hardware that they possibly need. And then you think, oh, hold on, this has all been put onto sort of like a floppy disk or something. And, in reality, it's never going to quite be the same.
Yeah, I don't think we'll go off on a slight tangent, but I don't think we got to a level where we had a console that could actually outclass arcade machines, probably until the Dreamcast, I would say. Because, a prime example is like Soul Calibur. I mean, you compare the arcade version to the Dreamcast game, it's like a PS1 version of that game compared to an amazing, 480p, beautiful graphics, amazing character models. And obviously, then the Dreamcast was turned into arcade hardware, the Naomi system, the Crazy Taxi and Virtua Tennis and all those great Naomi arcade games came from. But up until then, it was always a struggle. I mean, you get a little bit of a nice sort of era of a couple of years when a new console perhaps just came out, where, the Mega Drive could do a good port of Golden Axe. And, but then, I only took like another year or two to pass when you'd have like a Virtua Racing and then would come out, and then the Mega Drive would have to have all kinds of like life support things plugged into it for it to be able to do anything that remotely came close to what the arcade was. And it got, a good version of that in the end, but obviously it's nothing like the arcade. And there's also, even something like there was way more people working on that Mega Drive version of Virtua Racing, dozens of people compared to one bloke in a dingy US Gold office cubicle on his own, sort of thing.
And that's what the cartridge consoles had, didn't they? They could actually put hardware in the cartridges.
Yes.
Like the Super Effects chip for the Super Nintendo and things like that.
Yes.
But yeah, just what I wanted to mention that earlier you talked about scrolling beat-em-ups.
Yeah.
And that's it's a bit of a bugbear for me. That
I love that genre, so it is for me as well.
Yeah, it's a brilliant genre, and in the arcades it was fabulous. But they rarely made it onto the ST intact. So I've listed quite a few here, because when you asked me to come on, I started to think, what game should I talk about?
Yeah.
One of my absolute favorites, and even on the ST, it's my absolute favorite. One of my favorites, because I think it's worth mentioning that when it's all you had, you just made do and you enjoyed it. I think that's the thing a lot of the time. Like, if
it wasn't outright broken, it's probably still good enough, Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, so one of my absolute favorites is Golden Axe.
Oh, yes.
Now, I came across this game when my uncle was going on holiday. He was going to New York, and me and my mum, we gave him a lift to the airport. But his flight was delayed. And in Birmingham Airport at that time, in the lobby, they had a Golden Axe machine alongside a few others. I think Sly Spy might have been one of them.
Yeah.
But anyway, it was the Golden Axe machine that won his money. I think I was probably about 11 or something at the time. And so because his flight was delayed, he was just plowing money into this Golden Axe machine, and we completed the game. And I fell in love with that game ever since. And obviously learned that there's an ST version. So yeah, I must have dropped enough hints to my mum, and she bought it for me one birthday. I remember it's the funniest thing. I can still remember the smell of the box. How silly is that?
That fresh cardboard,
sniff that box. But yeah, I remember opening it the morning of my birthday and having to go to school.
So you're known, Marc, as a serial box sniffer.
I am a box sniffer. Yeah. There's no better way to.
You come out now, terrible.
I do it for everything though, like magazines, new books.
When you get one off eBay, like an old ST or Amiga game, and you can just open, you get that waft. There's
like an undertone of must.
Exactly.
Games, but still, anyway, Golden Axe. I mean, it's one of those moments where, because you don't know any better, the ST version that I played, more than happy with it. I mean, people talk about it now and they're quite negative about it because, the animation's not so good and the colors are washed out and it's a bit letterboxed at the top and the bottom. Like the status screen kind of encroaches on the play area to keep things running smoothly.
Yes.
So there's all that. But at the time, I didn't care less. It was Golden Axe at home and I didn't have to put a 10p in every time I wanted to play it.
It's probably the best scrolling beat 'em up on the ST.
Yeah, I did think, because you said that. Yeah. Did you say that during Final Fight when you said that might be the best? And I was thinking,
I might have done, yeah.
I think Golden Axe is probably the best.
Yeah, I mean, it's to be honest, like it plays pretty much, I would say, the same as the arcade and the Mega Drive versions. Obviously, you're a bit more squished. Like I say, it's letterboxed quite heavily, but it scrolls very smoothly for an ST game. It has kind of an element of push scrolling. You're going to have to sort of rock up right to the edge of the screen to nudge it over, but that's not really a big deal. The AI of the enemies is pretty much the same as the arcade, very fair, but difficult
except
at the
for
same time.
The is it the black skeletons? They're not fair.
Oh yes, yeah.
They don't play fair, not at all.
Apart from that, it's like I said, plays largely the same. You've got the 3 characters there. The music is good as well.
Yeah,
by ST standards, comparable again to the arcade. So yeah, I think that might be the best example, certainly of a scrolling beat 'em up, and maybe of arcade ports generally on the ST is GoldenEye. Because I mean, the Amiga version, probably, I don't know which one was the lead version. By that point, it might actually have been the Amiga version, might have been the lead version.
Yeah, the Amiga doesn't have the letterboxing, if I remember rightly. So
the resolution is still a tad lower than what we ended up with on the Mega Drive, but the music's a little bit better and it scrolls better. So I'll put it on the Amiga as well. It might probably be the best scrolling beat 'em up on the Amiga. So yeah, that is a great choice, Mark. What else have you got for us?
Hang on. So this is the absolute pinnacle. This is the best example I could come up with.
Oh my god!
Like I said, when you asked, you said about rubbish arcade ports that we enjoyed anyway. The absolute pinnacle of that is Double Dragon on the Atari ST.
Right,
There's no doubt. It's objectively bad. It's terrible. I mean, the graphics are horrifically drawn.
They look like children with afros.
Yeah, they're not the arcade sprites. They're some kind of twisted, horrible version of them. The patchwork backgrounds are ridiculous as well. They're just like a muddy mess. The enemies are repetitive. They're all just like different colored versions of the same 3 enemies. The animation is just unbelievably bad.
Yeah.
Like each move has about 2 frames. And the way they climb ladders is hilarious. They just kind of judder up a ladder. It's just terrible. Absolutely terrible. But I love it. Every time I play it, it just puts this big sloppy grin on my face.
I think it got like heavily marketed, didn't it? I think it was in the Power Pack, wasn't it?
Right,
the Atari ST Power Pack.
That's where we got it. But that's my uncle got
Mark,
the Power Pack
I've just typed into Google Double Dragon Atari ST. I want to have a look at some screenshots, and the top screenshot is a video of you playing it.
Have I got that big sloppy grin on my face?
Someone types in Double Dragon Atari ST into Google, it's a video of you playing it from back in 2014.
2014, my word.
I think the Amiga version is basically derived from the ST, so I don't think it's any better. I really think it's identical. To be honest, it's a game that didn't really get a really good home port that was close to the arcade. And most people would mention the NES version, but it's not.
Yeah, but it's very different, isn't it? It's very different.
But good, but in a good way. The Master System version's pretty decent. I remember there being a Lynx version that actually used the arcade sprites in the Lynx, but because the resolution is so low, it's really, really zoomed in to the detriment of the game.
Talking about what you were saying, Mark, about sort of it's all about the playability. I remember I had Double Dragon on the Spectrum, and the whole screen was yellow. I remember it yellow. The next level, the whole screen was blue. And me and my mate, I'm sure it was 2-player, and we went all the way through it and completed it and got right to the end. And I had great memories of it. But you look at it now, it's like the whole screen's blue. How can this be good?
It's funny you mentioned the end there. The end of Double Dragon obviously is iconic, isn't it? Where it's a co-op game until the very last moment. You have to fight for the affections of the girl.
That's great, though, isn't it?
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. But I would never let my cousin win. So obviously it was my uncle's ST. He got Double Dragon in the Power Pack, so I'd end up playing with my cousin loads. So we'd play through it, and I would never ever let him win. I would constantly beat him up, and he would beg and beg and beg to let me let him win, and I just wouldn't. I was so mean until it reached a head one day when he got so annoyed he just switched the ST off just before he died. just a brawl ensued between the two of us. It was hilarious.
Just like the game. I think one of the best version, and even that wasn't the best, like perfect, was probably the Mega Drive version, which came out very late in like 92, I think. That looked closest to the arcade, but I think they sort of fudged the gameplay a little bit, so even that still isn't
a bit of a slowdown, and I remember it not getting great reviews and stuff.
It might, yeah. I can't remember if the reviews were just because this is an old game. What are they doing, putting it on the Mega Drive? But yeah, I think it is. It's still a bit janky compared to like the arcade. But yeah, that's probably the most famous, I would say, out of all the Atari ST, because it was just so mass produced and re-released and put in the power pack and everything. Yeah, that's a really good one, Mark.
Another one came to mind when you mentioned the Nintendo port and the Master System ports are very different.
Yeah,
instantly sprung to mind was Enduro Racer.
Oh yes,
completely different on the Master System, isn't it? It's like an
isometric, yeah.
But the ST version is another one where it's objectively quite bad. If you look at all the elements of the game, its frame rate's pretty low. The controls are a bit stodgy, a bit spongy. But it's a game that I'll happily play over and over again. I'll come back to it and play it again and again. That's actually a really good game somehow, despite all of those negative parts.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of those Sega Superscaler games, they were obviously massively ported, weren't they? But it was difficult to recapture that sort of gameplay. But yeah, Enduro Racer managed to sort of still be playable despite that.
Yeah, and I think what it is, it's the core gameplay. It goes back to the point that I was saying before. If you kind of capture the raw element, the thing that made the original arcade so enjoyable, if you can capture that, then you're onto a winner. Because I think Enduro Racer does that. Despite all those negatives, it's still, I'm sure you're all familiar with how Enduro Racer works, right? You pull a wheelie just before you hit the ramp.
Yeah,
and then you got to pull a wheelie again when you land.
Yeah.
In order to maintain control of your bike. But while you're wheeling, you're slowing down. So it's always that kind of, you could hold a wheelie for longer to make you jump easier.
You got the trade-off, yeah.
Yeah, and that core gameplay element is really, really good in Enduro Racer, and they've captured it really well on the ST and like on the Spectrum and wherever else I've played it. It always seems to be a pretty good port, that one.
Yeah, and then funnily enough, like one of the later sort of Sega Superscaler games that came from Enduro Racer was Hang On, and that's got a great the port on the Amiga and the ST is really good, probably one of the best out of the Sega kind of arcade Superscaler games. Is that one that you played as well, Mark?
It is, yeah. Was that in the power pack as well?
I think it was,
I think it might have been. So we definitely played it, and I think you could control it with the mouse too.
I think that was the better control method, wasn't it?
Because
actually,
then obviously on the arcade you were on the bike, weren't you? So you could lean precisely and steer as much as you wanted. So putting that on the mouse was just brilliant. So in a funny way, the ST version is probably the better version to play than the Mega Drive port's obviously brilliant, but you don't have that analog control.
Doesn't translate really, well, does it?
Yeah, it works really well on the ST.
Yeah, it struggles to translate to digital controls. I mean, even later, sort of, remember Manx TT on the Saturn was quite difficult to control because it wasn't. Again, that was when we were on an actual bike. So you had an analog controller to help with that, of course. But with the ST, you had the original analog controller, the mouse, to help with that.
Having said that, I'm terrible at mouse control games. I mean, Vroom and Hard Driving, I think they used mouse, or No Second Prize.
Yeah,
I'm terrible at them all. Don't get me wrong, but it's still having that fine control. It's just right for Super Hang-On, isn't it? Just right. It takes it from just a normal racing game and actually makes it.
So how do you control it with the? It's not a stupid question, but I'm seeing Super Hang-On. Or Hang On, you should use a controller, surely. But then what do you just move the mouse to the left if you want to go left and right?
Yeah. And obviously you move it slightly if you want to lean slightly to the left, and move it a bit more if you want to really lean into the corner. And I think one button was accelerate and one button was brake. So it just
got
really
everything there. Yeah, those sort of incremental, degrees of movement are needed really in a game like that, and the mouse is perfect, isn't it, for that?
Yeah, it makes those kind of intricate overtaking maneuvers, where you just kind of sneak through two bikes on a bend. It just makes it feel so much better. I've got a video on my channel about where I just talk nonsense about what I think makes a good racing game, and I always think it's two things: the sense of speed and the thrill of overtaking. If a racing game has those two things, you're onto a winner.
Yeah.
And Super Hang-On. Is it Super Hang-On or Hang-On on the ST?
I think it was Super. It might be Hang-On.
Well, yeah, but it has it thanks to that, to the control system.
got me curious now. Which one was it? Was it actually Hang On or Super Hang? Oh, it was Super Hang On.
Okay.
Looks of things, yeah. So that's a great example as well. I mean, one that randomly sprung to mind, and we're sort of leaping back to scrolling beat 'em ups. One that I've kind of enjoyed, but although it's nowhere near as good as the arcade, is Turtles the Arcade Machine, or the coin op. Hero Turtles the coin op, as it would have been called over here, because there was a good port on the NES of that, where it was dramatically scaled down to work as a NES game, because the NES was really struggled with scrolling beat 'em ups. But the Amiga and the Atari versions of that game are kind of a bit more faithful in terms of how they look. Obviously, with the sound wise, you've kind of got the music. They attempt to recreate it, that amazing Konami sort of arcade music that we got for the ST, with its chip, with its sort of AY or YM chip. And it's not too bad, actually. Doesn't make you want to turn it off like some other ports have already talked about. But gameplay wise, it's not great. It's again, you kind of feel like you're just running around mashing the sort of the attack button just to hit the members of the Foot Clan that you're fighting. But I think most of it is in there. I can't remember if I think it might have been missing a couple of stages, but again, looking at it, it looks pretty good. It actually doesn't scroll too bad as well. It's pretty enjoyable. The collision detection is decent when you're in the area of a bad guy and you attack, you pretty much hit them, which is always a good thing in a scrolling beat 'em up. And yeah, I actually found it to be quite enjoyable. Again, taken in the context of when it was made, it's probably one of the better arcade translations. So yeah, that's one to look out for. Is Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles: The Coin Op. It's actually I think it's better than the Hero Turtles, the other game that came out, the sort of platformer.
Yeah, that was.
That game's really frustrating, though, isn't it?
Yeah, really, really frustrating. I mean, it's not great on the NES, which is where all the other versions kind of came from, that we got on the home computers. If you're going to play a Ninja Turtles game on the ST, I think you should play the coin op, because I think that's a much more enjoyable game. You'd be pulling your hair out if you try the other one. So, yeah. Is there any others, Mark? That
I tell you what, I've got a list as long as your arm.
Oh, go for it. Hit us with it.
So you mentioned there about the YM chip in the ST, the Yamaha sound chip, making a decent rendition of known theme tunes. One of the arcade ports that I really enjoy, that's probably considered to be quite poor, is Return of the Jedi.
Oh, right, yeah. The isometric,
one of the reasons I really enjoy it is because of that plinky plonky chiptune rendition of the John Williams soundtrack is just absolutely brilliant. It's like a really kind of light-hearted, jaunty jingle.
Yeah.
And it just works so well. The game itself is a bit odd. It's but then
it wasn't a great arcade game, I don't think.
No, the arcade was odd, wasn't it? You kind of played almost like 20-second long segments.
Yeah.
I think what they tried to do, obviously the movie Return of the Jedi has all of these massive events happening concurrently, don't they? So that the Rebel Alliance can overcome and destroy the Death Star. And I think the game tries to do that, which is laudable in a way, because not many games have done that, have they? Where you do a snippet of this and a snippet of that in that kind of cinematic sense.
No, not really, no.
So it's interesting in a way, but it doesn't quite work, because it just kind of snaps you out of one lot of action into another one and then into another one, and it feels a bit disjointed at times. But each individual thing, if you take it on its own merit, it's perfectly serviceable. I mean, you've got the bike in the Endor forest. That bit's quite cool because you can shoot the stormtroopers off their bikes, or you can ram them into trees, and Ewoks try to set traps for them and stuff like that. So that's quite charming.
You kind of look like a train driver sat on like a speeder. You don't really like Luke Skywalker,
right?
do you?
Yeah, absolutely. But then it zips to like you're flying over some Star Destroyers in the Millennium Falcon, I seem to remember. And then there's a bit where you actually storm the Death Star itself, and you've got to bizarrely the Death Star is coloured bright red and blue for some reason. And you've got to get to the core and destroy it. It's not a terrible game, but it's not a particularly good game. but I still have really fond memories of it. Really fond memories.
Yeah, and I think the wireframe kind of famous sort of first person games, the original Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back, I think they also got ports to the ST, and they're actually not too bad. Obviously, they were less demanding in the first place, being from like the early 80s, but those wireframe games I think translated quite well actually to the ST and the Amiga.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I didn't put these on my list, you see, because I was trying to find wonky arcade ports, arcade ports that weren't quite, on the money.
They've escaped the list.
Star Wars is on the money. That's an absolutely fantastic port.
Yeah.
You can't quite recreate the original arcade experience because of the vector graphics and the controller that it used. That was just an unbeatable experience, really. But in terms of bringing it home, the game is pretty much the same, and the mouse control is spot on. So yeah, I think that's a really good port.
Yeah.
The problem with Empire Strikes Back, though, is that there was quite a bit of slowdown, which the first game didn't have. So if I'm going to fire up a Star Wars vector graphics game, it will be the first one. Because like I say, the second one just got a bit of slowdown in it.
I think there was a bit more on the screen, wasn't there? Obviously, you're on a planet at half at the start, so it's probably a bit more overhead, isn't it, for the ST to draw all that stuff? So yeah, that's probably why there was a bit more slowdown in that one. Yeah. Yeah, Marc hit us with another one.
Okay, let's see. What else have I got? I kind of half mentioned Sly Spy Secret Agent earlier.
Yeah.
That's got a really good ST port too. It's a bit of a hidden gem, really. People don't tend to talk about it much, perhaps because they didn't even like the arcade in the first place. I don't know. But if you watch the arcade version and then watch the ST version, it's a really good port. That the frame rate's lower, the resolution's lower, there's less colors, all the obvious stuff. But apart from that, they got all of the game in there. I don't know if you know Sly Spy.
It's kind of like Rolling Thunder in some ways, where you're sort of walking along as an agent, obviously shooting guys, and platforming. Yeah.
But the difference with Sly Spy is that there's lots of different like set pieces and not mini games, but like each level has a different theme and it controls differently. Like there's you start off with a skydive level, and then there's a motorbike bit, there's a scuba diving bit. So each level kind of springs a new surprise.
It's very smooth. It scrolls very smoothly as well. Just looking at some footage on YouTube, it's quite impressive.
Look at it, and it looks like a James Bond.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It is.
Yeah,
it's a James Bond
sort of rip off.
Yeah, and it's pretty good. I'd recommend people give that one a shot. But you mentioned Rolling Thunder as well. That's on my list. A lot of people don't like the ST version, but it's one of those cases where that was the only version I knew. So I was quite happy playing it. It seemed like a really good game. It's only when you see the arcade version running where it's full screen, it's all scrolling smoothly, and it's very quick. The arcade version is a bit more of an arcade blaster, whereas the ST version, because it's so slow, it becomes a bit more kind of strategic and tactical in the way that you play it.
It could almost work as another game that wasn't called Rolling Thunder, and people would probably say it's good. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. What else did I have? Let's see. Going back to brawlers, going back to scrolling beat 'em ups, I'd put Shadow Warriors.
Oh, that was good.
Oh yeah. Ninja Gaiden.
But it's the original. Ninja Gaiden,
yeah.
But except if you say Ninja Gaiden to me, my mind goes to the Nintendo version,
the platformer.
I can see Arcus speedrunning it. Booming through. Do you know who Arcus is?
No.
It's speedrunner on Twitch, plays Ninja Gaiden a lot. So. And he's just incredible at that. Very, very difficult.
It's a difficult game to play normally at normal speed. So yeah.
So that's Ninja Gaiden in my head. I didn't realize that Shadow Warriors is actually a conversion of the original Ninja Gaiden.
It's funny you should say that actually, because my first experience of Ninja Gaiden was the Atari Lynx game, and that is the arcade version. It's not it's not a port of the NES game, and that's it's a really good port of the original arcade. Funny enough, they did port the third Ninja Gaiden game to the Lynx, and that is the platforming NES game. So yeah, kind of weird, but so I'm kind of with you. I didn't see the NES version till later. So yeah,
right. And it's very good. It's another one where they've used the arcade assets to make the ST graphics, and they've done it really well. And I think the arcade game itself, although it was higher resolution, the sprites were smaller. so it works a little bit better than Final Fight. And they've
good use of the color palette as well. They've really managed to spread that out, those 16 colors, nicely.
And they've managed to include lots of the elements of the arcade game, like swinging on the posts and destructible terrain and things like that. So that and the throw moves and things. So I mean, it's good, but the problem is the slowdown really lets it down. As soon as there's like, I'd say, more than 3 sprites on the screen, it slows to a crawl, and it really, really slows down significantly.
Yeah.
So that's a shame, but it's still a good play.
I don't think it's a particularly fast scrolling beat 'em up anyway. It's a bit more considered and a bit more it's just a slower pace than your Final Fights and your Double Dragons, I think. So in that sense, absolutely. The slowdown isn't so detrimental. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mark, do any games sort of come to mind where the arcade version was? It looked one way, but then the Atari ST version was just a completely different game, as in it was, maybe less sort of 3D and more. They decided to do something completely different, sort of with it, because it was actually we can't replicate what the arcade's done here.
Right. In a way, I wish that more developers did that.
Yeah,
what we were talking about before, when they try to implement the scrolling and the big sprites, is when things often go wrong. I kind of wish that arcade porters were a bit more brave, like they were with Enduro Racer on the Master System. Yeah, that's a completely different game, but it's a really good game. I don't think anybody would have been disappointed getting that home and playing it. What a cracking little game that was.
I heard about related to Enduro Racer. We talked about 2 or 3 times. The UK version or the PAL version originally came out on a card. Then it came out, and then they obviously the Master System, and then they ported it, or produced it on the cartridge, and it only had 5 levels. But actually, the original version in Japan actually has 10 different levels, so it's got twice as much content. Right. But then they were really lazy when they were taking it from the card version to the cartridge. Like, they got the space now. Why don't you do the whole version? But they didn't. They just sort of made it the same version. So if you ever get the opportunity to get the Japanese version of Enduro Racer on the Master System or the System 3 or whatever it's called, it's actually got twice as much content.
Huh. Well, scrolling through here, I did notice one game that's worth mentioning is Boogie Boy.
Oh yeah.
Because that's a game where you can't quite recreate the arcade experience, because am I right in thinking there were 3 monitors on that? They put 3 monitors.
I think there was, yeah.
So and obviously you got the steering wheel or whatever it was. And then you can't quite recreate that at home, but still the ST port, although a bit more of a standard racer, is really good.
It looks really the same. It's not quite, I think it's like probably 60 frames a second in the arcade, but it's smooth enough to capture the feel. And because of the color palette is quite cartoony, I think, in the original version. The limited Atari ST palette doesn't really, or lack of colors doesn't really have a difference. Yeah, it works really well. Yeah,
and that's a really early ST game as well. So
yeah,
a lot of racers early on in the ST's life were really dodgy. I'm thinking like Outruns. The port of Outrun is just utterly terrible.
Oh yeah,
And then you've got Crazy Cars, which is just don't play
crappy cars.
But yeah, Boogie Boy is 1988. That was released. I've just seen.
Yeah.
So they did really well with that one.
The game comes to mind is Hard Driving.
Oh yeah, the polygon.
That was to me. I always felt that it sort of looked good in the arcade, but then always looked awful at home. But when actually, I think what point I'm making is that games like Stunt Racer were actually very similar, 3D, but actually when they weren't tied to an arcade game,
games.
They were better games because they didn't have to have this same great big track, and it was like a slideshow, wasn't it? And it was just awful. But then actually going, well, what works well with these sort of low power computers? Okay, we'll put everything on a great big sort of pedestal, and you get the sense of speed and things like that, but you don't have to have all the huge draw distances and stuff.
Yeah, that's a great point you make, Stuart. And I think that's the thing when you've got a limited, in terms of power platform, you really need to build your game to take advantage of what it can do, rather than trying to pry into it something that it's not designed to do. And that's not to say that some developers have done amazing things prying games onto systems they didn't belong. But often the system's best games are the ones that are built from the ground up for that system. So I went back and had a look at my, I don't know if you know about this, guys, but I did a survey to find out what everybody's favourite Atari ST games were.
Yeah, I remember that. And you did quite a big, long video series, I think, wasn't it, as well?
So then, obviously, I just fished for as many votes as possible and then just collated a list of, and assigned scores to everybody's votes and then collated a big spreadsheet with those. So I went back to have a look at the top 50 that I made, or that everybody made, I suppose, with their votes. And if you look through there aren't many coin-op conversions. So, people's favourite games, they don't tend to be the arcade conversions. They tend to be the games that are built with the system in mind.
Well, I think the issue is that arcade games are designed for you to, put your money in. And actually, when you're at home, and I remember my fondest memories on the Amiga, which I mentioned before, I never had an Atari ST, was I like sitting down playing Championship Manager. I like playing, Settlers. I like playing, Theme Park, and it was just that type of game that was never really actually sort of an arcade game. And I'm surely I must have sort of, but I don't really have too many memories of, I mentioned sort of playing Double Dragon and sort of things like that, and they're all, very enjoyable. But to me, actually, being at home, you want to play more a long format game, and I think towards the end, it always felt like an arcade conversion might have been, people like US Gold or Ocean. I've seen too many bad ports here and things like that. It's not what it looked like in the arcade, or in fact, in the arcade, it was so hard that I never actually wanted to play it.
Yeah, it tended to be like the console ports would tend to be better than the home computer ports, just because certainly things that originated in Japan, like something like Contra or Gradius, like Konami, basically, often it'll be the same people that made the arcade game that would be working on the home port, and often they'd have a huge team around them to do that. So there's just a slightly, I'm not throwing shade on the game development that we had over here at that point in time, because they did miracles with the limited resources they had, but it was just a bit more professional, perhaps. Again, I don't want to say anything make it sound bad, but like they would just dedicate a huge team just to make a really good home port of Contra for the NES, and that's what we got. In fact, you could argue Contra on the NES is better than the arcade, because it did try and make it fit where it was going, but a bit better. Yeah, so that was more common there.
You hear stories, don't you, over here of the Oliver twins. They were paid £500 to make Super Robin Hood, and they couldn't. They were rolling in money. They were, and then you sort of you paraphrase that at the same time in Japan. They were making Super Mario, and obviously what one stood the test of time and one hasn't, and it's not taken anything away from them. It was an amazing achievement, and there's all films and books about the British sort of bedroom coders, and they've that's generated. If you think how many amazing games that have come out of the UK, and it's all because of these things that happened 35, 40 years ago, and what that's generated. And I just think I'm obviously not a coder, but if I was working on a project, I'd have a lot more enthusiasm if I was doing my own game, where I could create my own characters, my own story. And I'd almost maybe see it as a little bit of an insult to go, oh yeah, here you go. This game came out in Japan. It's a really good arcade game. Here's, I don't know, a bag full of 50p's. Go wild, and then you got 6 weeks to copy it. And and I'll be all right. Yeah, I've got to do it. And but I don't know. I think you're losing your artistic passion, I guess.
Yeah, you're limited as to what you got to do. I mean, that kind of. Sorry, Mark. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and I think the transition from that kind of the 8-bit microcomputers to your 16-bit home computers, business got bigger.
Yeah,
you know, games were selling more. The investment you needed to make into making a game got bigger.
It took longer and was more difficult, and
like companies just didn't want to take as many risks, I think.
Yeah.
Whereas during the ZX Spectrum days, a lot of those games just started off in people's bedrooms. They were making them for fun because, like you were saying, Stuart, it was their passion. It was it's their creativity going straight into that tape that you were buying and playing. Whereas transitioning into the 16-bit era where business was slightly bigger, there was a lot less of that. There was still some of that, don't get me wrong. I mean, there's a game that I can mention in a bit, actually, that we haven't mentioned yet that I want to shout out.
Yeah.
But a lot of it was, it could no longer be just one person making a game. You needed a dedicated programmer, a dedicated artist, a dedicated musician, and teams grew and grew and grew. And by the time you're spending that much money on making a game, publishers wanted a surefire hit, so they would rely on, conversions from the arcades to provide that. Because like Street Fighter 2, they probably still made money off that, no matter how terrible it was.
I bought it, so
yeah, absolutely. Whereas if a game was terrible on the ZX Spectrum, people wouldn't have bought it. I don't know.
Going back to the it kind of comes off from this really, but the limitations that they had. I mean, often they wouldn't have any of the code from the arcade machine. They wouldn't have any of the assets given to them. They'd have to literally and it carried on well into the 90s. I mean, a channel that I watch quite a lot, and I've kind of binged recently, Pandemonium Saturn reviews. Right. He might be appearing on our show sometime. Nice. Keep your eyes peeled. But yeah, he just did a great interview with the guys that ported Virtua Racing to the Saturn, which is actually a really good version of Virtua Racing. It's kind of got a whole campaign mode to it, which the arcade didn't have. It's actually got the most content out of all the versions that have ever came out, even the recent Switch port, which is brilliant, but still basically just the arcade machine. And there was they were talking about what they had to do, and when there was the interviewer was asking them, like, did you get given the source code, and then you kind of just had to adapt that? And they're like, no, we were given the Virtua Racing arcade machine. We had it in the office, which is obviously really cool because we could just play it all day, and we just had to play it, and we basically had to recreate the game from us how we felt it played. We weren't given any assets; we had to build them again. All we got from Sega were some maps of the 3 arcade tracks. They're showing like the elevation and the different where the mountains are placed and the trees and everything. That was all we had. We had to build everything from scratch with a development kit that was all in Japanese, wasn't translated. If we wanted to ask Sega something, we had to wait a day at least to get an answer. So we had to just make up the engine ourselves. So they had to do everything, from scratch. That's basically what these guys had to do that made a lot of these ST ports that we're talking about. Often it was just one person as well.
And I've come unstuck a couple of times in the past where I've laid into a game that I'm playing on my channel, and then the developer of the game has got in touch with me afterwards. Oh, wow. And I've had to apologise.
Really, yeah.
But this is the thing, you didn't see that side of it at all, did you? All you had was the game. The
journalist
in front of you.
The journalist would lay into the games as well, and the program would have to sit there and cry in the corner.
These days, if you like a game and you play a game, you can follow the developer on Twitter or touch with them on Instagram and things like this. So you see what goes into the development of a game, and you see the real human beings behind these games. Whereas there was none of that back in the day.
Yeah, it was a wild west, really. It's probably
you didn't have a clue who they were, and the famous one was obviously for the Atari 2600 ET, and that always sort of comes to mind. I can't remember his name, but he made like things like Yar's Revenge. He's a really good coder and who made sort of quality games. And he was told, you've got 2 months, 3 months, for the Christmas window, make ET. Here's a basic outline.
The same guy made like Yard's Revenge. The same guy made Yard's Revenge.
Yeah.
Howard Scott Warshaw, yeah.
Howard, yeah, that was it. Yeah. And it was just, well, actually, for years, he was the guy that made that awful game.
The guy who destroyed the video game
stories is now a little bit different about him, and he gets a little bit more sort of credit. And going, well, actually, I don't think I could have made a game better than ET in that limited amount of time. And
absolutely,
and I think he was working 22 hours a day or something.
Yeah, and I was talking earlier, wasn't I, about trying to pry a certain type of game onto systems that it just wasn't designed for. The Atari 2600 is an example of that, where really it's a Pong machine. That's what it's programmed to be able to do. Pong and maybe a Space Invader-ish kind of game.
I wouldn't even go that far.
It was designed for,
yeah. So we had. Go on, Mark. Sorry.
The fact that we've got all these various different types of Atari 2600 games, like adventure and the crazy things that Activision did a bit later, is down to just developer genius, really. And I just wanted to say that nobody ever set out to make a bad game. So even these games that I play now and just think, are utterly terrible. And my mind's racing now thinking about even this podcast. Which games have I rubbished? Which developers going to be getting in contact with me again? But nobody ever set out to make a bad game. It's the constraints of the industry at the time. Just ridiculous. Here's a machine that you don't really know very well. We want a game on it in 2 months.
It's
that
crazy,
kind of thing, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the Atari ST. We had like 0-page homebrew on our show a few months ago. Who do a really great Atari 2600 channel. If anyone hasn't checked them out, check them out. They show some of the latest sort of Atari 2600 homebrew. Some of it is absolutely mind-boggling. When the Atari ST really just has a ball and a missile sprite, and that's basically it.
2600.
Yeah, 2600. What did I say?
You were saying Atari ST.
Atari ST.
The ST was limited, but not that limited.
Not that limited, yeah.
I'll just say Atari, and then people can work out which one. But yeah, the 2600. All it had was a missile on a ball sprite, and people just mangled those two sprites into all kinds of things to make, the amazing games that we got. Your Pitfalls and your Enduro racers, and all those amazing games. Just from that, it's just they're like miracles, really. And there's even more amazing stuff that's come out, in the last few years. Someone's is making a version of Doom on the 2600. There's literally a first-person shooter.
No.
Check out 0-page homebrew. He showed it off. Mortal Kombat. Someone's made Mortal Kombat for the Atari 2600
There's
as well.
Double Dragon on there as well.
There was, the very end.
That's
Kind of a miracle, terrible version of it, but it's cool
it's a terrible
as well.
version, but credit to the guy that did it.
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing. We've actually just gone over the hour mark, but I would like to see what Marc's ultimate game of his list, the one that he's probably been really eager to tell us, is the one that fits that best example of perhaps, not so good a game, but we loved it anyway. Marc, what would that be?
Well, what should I go for? It's got to be Double Dragon. Don't get me wrong, it's nowhere near my favorite game. It is a terrible game. It's a bad game. But you just can't beat that sloppy grin it puts on your face when you're playing it.
The sloppy grin factor.
Yeah, if you want to witness the sloppy grin, then head to my channel and look for the Double Dragon video, because you'll see it.
It's top of Google.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the epitome of it for me, is where something is better than the sum of its parts. Absolutely.
Has the Atari ST version got the classic music? Because that's when the game starts, that first level's music is just I'll play it just for that. I love it.
So there's no music during the game.
Oh,
but there is a sample of I think it's the same music as the arcade that plays during the title screen, but it's like a 9-second clip or something, this sample, and it's kind of cut a bit wonkily, so it doesn't quite work.
Oh no!
But yeah, no in-game music.
Oh, that's what makes it for me. But yeah.
It's just amazing what people can do with the hardware that they're presented. I mean, we've got homebrew now, so there's some great Atari ST ports that are coming out of the homebrew scene as well.
Oh yeah, have you seen recently? Somebody's been working on what's the game? Metal Slug.
Yes. There's videos on YouTube. It looks amazing,
and it's not a port; it's being built from the ground up, which just makes it even more incredible.
It looks the same. It literally looks the same. I couldn't believe it. The demo. How
unbelievable! And it does look just the same as well, doesn't it? I mean, in terms of the excellent animation and how is it done? But that's the kind of thing people point to and say, look, it was possible on the ST.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think recently you released a video showing the entire first level. I think he's managed to finish it.
Yeah.
And it looks brilliant. I mean, I would love for them. You kind of almost want. I mean, it's easy for us to say and to tell people to go out and make this stuff when we don't do it ourselves. But I would love to see people enact sort of justice on some of those ports and maybe make a definitive port, probably using the STE hardware of like Street Fighter 2, of Final Fight, maybe Ninja Turtles: The Coin Op, or some of those games that we've mentioned.
Yeah, it's been done a few times.
Outrun, I think they're doing an STE version.
Oh yeah, but Pac-Mania, somebody's gone into that, and because the ST version, it was still a decent version. But it was again letterboxed to keep everything smooth. So somebody's gone into that and then made it full screen, and I think they've changed like the samples and stuff like that to make it a bit close to the original arcade version. And what else? Somebody was working on R-Type. It was Unseen Menace, I think the guy's name was, but I think something happened to him, unfortunately. So he wasn't able to finish that.
Yeah, see, it was like basically using the STE hardware to make the scrolling smoother, and I think he took the sprites from the arcade, so they look identical. Yeah, that looks absolutely amazing.
Somebody did Great Gianna Sisters as well, I think.
Yeah, I've played the enhanced version of that. It's identical to the Amiga now. Scrolls completely. Yeah, looks brilliant.
And this is the thing: the STE had those capabilities. It did have hardware scrolling. I don't think it had hardware sprites, but still.
I think with Gianna Sisters that you can they've implemented like the smooth scrolling on just the ST version.
Wow.
I think it uses more RAM. I think it has to have like 1 megabyte, but whatever they've done with that extra memory, they've managed to get it to smoothly scroll even on just a regular ST, which is amazing. I think a lot of ports are not even ports. There, a lot of people are taking, like I've seen recently, like Lotus Turbo Challenge. They've made like an STE version of that as well.
Right. Yes.
Make use of the blitter and
I think that was more for like the visual fidelity. I think he wanted the things like the nice gradient in the background and things like that were missing. So less of, because I mean that game does scroll quite nicely in terms of speed anyway. It
looked great already, didn't it? Yeah. I mean, you could probably look at Stardust. I think it's probably like which is an STE only game, wasn't it? That's like a shooter, but it looks absolutely amazing. And I'm not even sure an Amiga on its own would probably struggle with that. There wasn't an Amiga version of Stardust, was there? Am I imagining? Maybe there's a 1200 version.
Yeah, it was on the 1200.
1200, yeah. It's on the STE, but the stuff that you see in that game is absolutely amazing. And hopefully, more people will come out with ports. We'd love to see obviously new games as well, but perhaps some of those old ports that weren't so great as those programmers were, to get them, just so Mark, you won't get anyone chasing you, headhunting you. It'd be great to see what the ultimate version could be achieved.
Oh, you mentioned it, Outrun. We need a good version of Outrun on the ST.
I think people have tweaked the original to make the frame rate a bit better, but it's still the slightly janky original version. We'd love to see something along the lines of, like the Mega Drive version or something, which is much closer to the arcade. But maybe there's someone working on it right now frantically that will get released at some point. But yeah, so that was some of our sort of highlights in terms of Atari ST ports. Some that weren't so great, but we love them anyway because they're all we had back in the day. Some that actually were really good, like Golden Axe, that are probably still worthy of being played today when held up against other versions. But Marc, you are a dedicated Atari ST channel. Where can we find you on the interwebs?
You can find me by searching for The Joy of Sticks on YouTube.
I was going to say Double Dragon on the Atari ST. You can find your channel.
Apparently, if you Google Double Dragon Atari ST, there's my sloppy grin video to watch. Yeah, or it's at The Joy of Sticks on Twitter. You can definitely reach me there. Cool.
Thanks, Marc. Stu, where are we these days?
I will on everything. Twitter, Console Shock, so iTunes, any sort of podcast client, Spotify, Stitcher. If you search Console Shock, you'll find us on there. The website, consoleshock.net, and finally on Facebook as well, Console Shock. Oh, and YouTube as well. So we do upload the videos to YouTube as well.
And if you're interested in Star Trek or you're a Trekkie, you can check out my other podcast, Long Range Sensors. We have new episodes every couple of weeks. Stu's thumbing down it right now, if you could see on our camera here. But yeah, if you're into that, check it out. Otherwise, thank you everybody. Take care, and we will see you in the next one.
See you guys.
Take care.